Wow, are we rolling? This is pretty cool. You know, let me start this off by saying I've wanted to have a second channel where I could post whatever I want to talk about without the fear of like being perfect. And my main channel, I've always wanted to produce the highest quality content I could, and brain dumps didn't really suffice. Um, and I never wanted to put it on there. But here on Alex Slater's diary, I get to talk about whatever the fuck I want to talk about. And, bro, my mind has been exploding recently. Absolutely exploding. So, anticipate a lot of good content to come from this channel very soon. But let's start with the past. I have been diving into like archived BBC news articles from like the 70s. I've also been diving into old school movies from Steven Spielberg from the 2000s. I know it's not that old, but they were always set like in the past, like the 60s and 70s. And bro, like life has changed so much. And I think a lot of the world in the present day has mirrors of itself in the past. What I mean by that, the top artists of the modern era, like the Central C's, the Drakes, the 21 Savages, these kind of people coexisted in the 2000s when it was like, 50 Cent, when it was Justin Bieber, when it was Kanye, when these people were the icons of the modern era. And over the years and over the decades, they evolve and they take different forms and different people and different names. But that's just so fucking fascinating to me. And these people rise when culture shifts. When culture is receptive to a different type of individual, different type of sound, different type of art, popularity is gained. And again, new individuals rise. And some of these people of the 2025s could be like the Olivia Rodrigos. They could be the Kid Leroy's even. And it's so fucking fascinating because Kid Leroy is just, I guess, another Justin Bieber. But he's even more modern than the current. I think, I don't know, I think so much can be learned. And so much will continue to be shown and learned from history that will always appear in the present. Like, it's just a perpetual cycle. It's literally a perpetual cycle. And I think if you can zoom out and imagine that you are currently in the past, you can kind of anticipate / predict what the future could look like. And if you position yourself correctly, you could achieve whatever you want. And I don't want to make this corny, but it's genuinely true. I was watching a BBC archive from 2002 where they were talking about 3G, like the mobile data, and how 3G wasn't widespread enough to be a good business decision. Companies were pouring tens of billions of dollars, or pounds even, into getting that technology right and building the infrastructure in the UK, but they weren't sure it would reflect in the numbers. At least that's what the media said. The media said there wasn't like a greater use case outside of business customers, and so they'd be losing a lot of money in the consumer side. But zoom forward 23 years and we're at 5G, and like this was clearly the future, but we didn't know that we needed that much data and that much speed until the iPhone came out, when social media started to rise. And in 2002, when all they had really was like SMS, it didn't seem obvious. Oh, I mean, everything is obvious in hindsight. So that's one thing. But I was even like, here's another example. I was looking at Tesco in the 70s. This was part of the 70s BBC news article I watched. It was talking about how Tesco's was cutting prices to beat other supermarket competitors, and they were also producing or labeling in-brand items to stack on the shelves to make costs cheaper for customers. This is the exact same playbook that we're still running 50 years later. But this time, instead of Tesco being the slasher, it's like Aldi or Lidl. And Tesco's become like a premium brand. But it's weird because across the board, all the supermarkets rose their prices, and it wasn't until I don't know when Lidl came about. I'm gonna say they started gaining popularity in the 2010s, 2015s. Like for 40 years, there wasn't much competition, and then boom, Lidl's now like a multi-billion-dollar company just by ripping the same playbook Tesco ripped 40 years prior. A lot of these things don't change throughout business and life, and we tend to forget as a civilization, as a society, a lot of what happens in the past in exchange for something new. And it is just so interesting that this world is just like, there's just so much hustle and bustle, there's just so much happening at once. There are so many stories being written, and everyone's just living in it. Everyone's a part of it, everyone's contributing. Even me documenting what's going on in my mind right now is piecing together what we know about the world. Our collective intelligence helps us paint a picture of how Earth is and what it's like. Crazy. It's actually crazy. Another crazy thing is everyone that's successful, or at least the stories that are told, are always so remarkable. But how could they not be? How could great stories not be remarkable? You know? Like the founder of Tesco, he started a market with in some local market in London, selling on the street with £40 in his pocket, and he turned it into a multi-$100 billion empire. Remarkable, right? But how could it not be? How could a story that bold not be remarkable? Of course it is. Beautiful. The world's very poetic. Another thing I've just really been pondering about is whatever you think you are, and as cliche as it sounds, it's so true. Do you really think the greatest people in this world didn't think they were great? Or didn't aspire to be great? Or didn't try to be great? Because if they didn't, where would they be? No one really does things without their will, and no level of sustained excellence is granted without sheer persistence and pain and suffering. Just because you want something doesn't mean you're gonna get it. It doesn't matter how much or how hard you beg and want for something, it doesn't translate in the real world. It doesn't matter how much you try. It matters if you got the job done. Everyone that's achieved excellence, I have so much love for. David Beckham, Donald Trump, Aubrey Graham. The list goes on and on and on. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And I hope to see myself on that list, and I know I will see myself on that list. On that note, though, I see so many people talking about, oh, like, I just locked in, bro, like, I just put 10 hours into coding, like, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Cool. But the result you're gonna, the result that you're gonna end up with isn't measured by how much work you put into it. Or how much time, sorry, not work. Maybe time is a better example. Or, I guess even work, because it doesn't matter if I'm writing a plan on my notes and I'm classifying that as work. If it didn't get you the result you wanted, then you didn't deserve it. It's like a simple law of the universe. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And, you know, I love to go on about my story in San Francisco when I was broke and I was, you know, like grinding. I was coding for 2 weeks straight, and I finally launched on Reddit, and I was making my first sales, and how like beautiful that experience was. But it wasn't about how hard I worked or how young I was or how much money I had in my pocket. It was about making the right product and doing the right marketing. That's all. Everything else is just fluff. There is an element of timing as well that's important here. And I think I got lucky timing. And that's when I think, that's where I believe the only area of credit is given to the amount of work you put in. So if you put in a lot of work, maybe you catch timing better than others do that aren't working as hard. But yeah, like, I don't know, man. I'm at this point in my life where I was looking at the numbers, $4 million in revenue from Quitter. I remember when I was looking on my plane back to London, I had $1,000 in sales, and I took a snap of it, and I wrote a little snap caption with text saying, I'm going to look back on these days and laugh at my $1,000 sales. And yeah, I look back on them and I laugh. We do over 15 times that every single day now on the regular. I don't even have to move a finger. Beautiful. But yeah, I'm at a point in my life where Quitter's had its rise. There's still so much to figure out. Obviously, the world is not going to give me everything I've dreamed of, and that's not money, by the way. But it's not just going to hand me these amount of resources willingly. Like, just 4 million, here you go. 20 years old, there you go. One app, you got it. No, I burnt all of it pretty much, and now I need to go back into figuring out how to remain profitable, how to not spend so much on the team, how to be smart with the money, and how to multiply the revenue. Like, cut costs and make more revenue, and then take from the bottom line. And that's the lesson I got to learn. That's the chapter I'm in. But I'm also at a chapter that is very exploratory. I low-key want to get into acting. A part of me doesn't just want to be behind a screen or, you know, recording YouTube vids. I feel like my life is destined for way more than that. And that is politics, and I do want to get into it. I'm actually a little bit scared because, especially with what happened to Charlie Kirk and what happened to Trump almost, I don't want to be threatened for my life if I say something that might offend some people, even though it's for the greater good, and then I find myself a death sentence. I don't know if I want that. But it's more heroic to just disregard that fear and just do it anyway. And stand for what I believe in. And if the people believe in it as well, then I get the votes. But that's a topic for another day. But one of my two true passions that I'm realizing now is singing, which I've always said, and acting. Acting is something I used to do, and I really did enjoy it. But after watching a lot of Leonardo DiCaprio, Steven Spielberg movies, my mind's just blown. I want to be a part of the set. I want to play these characters. I want to be watched on Netflix by millions of people. I want to become iconic. I think that's what this is all about. I want to become iconic. I want to be cemented in culture. Why? Because I feel like I define a new way of thinking. I want to be the icon, or I want to be a beacon of hope at least, for people to realize you can be whoever the fuck you want, no matter what you look like or how you act. I can be the Prime Minister of the UK as a 28-year-old who's funny, who's charismatic, who goes on nights out, but also does the hard work and does the right work. It's so, yeah. I don't know. I kind of just want to enlighten everyone. I feel like a lot of people, at least, and especially in this country, are just like in a shell. Where like, they maybe have some belief. I guess this speaks for people of like all regions, all countries, everywhere across the globe. You may have some level of aspiration, but for some reason 99.99999% of people never achieve that vision. And I don't know if it's because some people are just born to be great, and whatever stress comes their way, they don't give a shit, and they just keep going, and they keep learning, and they keep being better, and eventually the world starts to catch on, one day at a time. Or if it's a culture thing, and if we can change culture, a bit like Rich Dad Poor Dad, we live in a thriving universe of people building exceptionally cool things every single day, and we're all consumers of each other's products. I don't care to make the best toilet paper, for example. I don't care to make the best light bulb. But I feel like the world would be better if everyone strived to create the best version of everything they're passionate about. The best sounding music. The best designed football kit. That's the kind of world I want to live in. Definitely pretty far off that right now. I feel like a lot of these great builders' attentions have gone to the things that make the most money, which is cool. But I always ponder a world where the greatest designers and the greatest engineers worked on problems that didn't really interest them, just in the effort of creating the best of whatever it is. Because I think that's where the world's heading. Everything will take its final form. Every decade, usually, in most cases, things will be iterated upon to get to a better form, or a more final form than the years prior. Just like the iPhone. The iPhone is irrefutably better designed and better capability-wise than it was 20 years ago. You can say the same thing about probably buildings or infrastructure or cars or any. I know I'm mentioning like technology a lot, but even like football and the art of that industry. These are all things that are taking a more and more final form that's kind of better for the consumers and better for the businesses and creates a thriving economy. Point is, the small things like light bulbs and socks and mattresses and curtains and chairs, TVs even maybe, they don't have much innovation because people don't really care about these things enough, at least, to change the world with them. But imagine if they did. Interesting thoughts. Yeah, I don't expect anyone to listen up to this point. To be honest, I hope these messages make sense in like 5-10 years. I feel like words gain a lot more respect and a lot more value when there's context behind the person who's speaking them. If I was saying these words as a drugged up man on the streets, I would sound like I'm absolutely crazy. But if these same words were spoken by Mr. Donald Trump, everyone would be clapping their hands. You know what I mean? Isn't that crazy? And that is the art of perspective. And final note here, because I think it's cool. It's the same way when you're selling products. If they're delivered poorly, whether that be through branding, whether that be through packaging, whether that be through actual product, like what the actual product feels like and how it's built and how it's manufactured and how whatever. If that's poor, it'll be recepted differently than if it was presented by some in a better light with a ribbon, with a ribbon, premium wood. You open it up like an apple box and you smell the fresh leather, and there's a note handwritten from the founder that's saying, "Thank you for joining us on our mission." You could sell the same item and maybe the price is a little bit more expensive. Maybe it's an extra £1 or £2 to produce. But which one do you think people would, go for more? Or at least say that they liked better. I said it was the final thought, but it wasn't. It's crazy how many people lived in the city before me. And now I'm sitting in my apartment near the top of the skyline. Not the very top. There are definitely taller buildings. But I'm up there. I'm up there. I'm very, very much up there. Looking down at the world. It's beautiful how much history this city and country have had over the years. How this river never changed. It always remained in this position for all those years. And now it is my chance to carry the torch for the next generation. To hopefully build something that withstands my physical body. And my grandparents seem to do it to some extent. They sadly and poetically and maybe even for the best lost all their money to a Nigerian scammer when that whole thing was a massive deal. We laugh about it now because it's super obvious, but in the 80s, 90s, when you're a British businessman and you get on the phone with this Nigerian, he's like, yo brother, like, I'm working for the king, he's worth billions of dollars, we just need X amount of pounds, and you send the pounds, and then he asks for more, and you send more, and you're so deep in that you lose it all. And they developed collars. They were like the first. I think my granddad was the inventor of like the collar on a shirt, which was pretty cool. And then he had his blueprint stolen, and then he made money elsewhere. I'm not really too sure of the story, but I think it's good he lost his money because it allowed me to build myself. I would hate to be born rich and not have a mission to strive for. I know there's bigger missions than money, but fuck me, is it a driver. It is such a driver, because once you attain it, you can choose whatever life you want to live. I can choose to buy a strawberry, and that's what I want to eat, and that makes me happier. And in result, that piece of money has been exchanged for a piece of my happiness. There you go. I think anyone that's born rich has just played the GTA 5 money glitch, and you know how that goes. After an hour of buying all the cars and apartments you want, you're fucking bored. And you just reset, and you just play again, go from scratch. Because you like the thrill of slowly compounding and learning and growing and conquering. Why would you want it handed to you? That's why spawning in stacks of 64 diamonds in Minecraft Creative is just not fun. Defeats the point. So I'm really glad he lost his wealth. I wouldn't be nearly as pushed if I had that much of a wealth blanket. God no. God no. Almost 28 minutes on the clock. That's crazy. Huh. Time flies when you're having fun. But yeah, I said it was the last thing I was going to talk about a few things ago. I probably should stop saying that in future videos, because my mind loves to wonder and ponder about the next thing and the next thing, and I just keep going. By the way, I'm not crazy. I just, like, the fact I'm not, the proof I'm not crazy is I could have just dumped these videos like ages ago. But I do love getting my thoughts because it's so interesting, bro. And I don't really have anyone else to speak about this with, so I'm just gonna dump it and see what the world thinks. Woohoo! But yeah, one thing I would do, or a couple of things I'd do if I was the Prime Minister of the UK. Okay, so this is my plan, right? I haven't thought too deeply about laws and legislations at all, because it's tricky, and every time you increase taxes or decrease taxes or do this and do that, it will affect someone. And it's a zero-sum game. I believe that's the right context, where like every time you win, someone loses. Yeah, I think that's the right context. But here are some easy ones that I do just to make the country happier, the civilians happier. And if the civilians are happier, I'm doing a good job as a Prime Minister. Not always, but for the people, yes. I would abolish the fucking yellow box fines, I think everyone just is in distaste of them. I would abolish the yellow line rule, maybe. I'll look into it. But when people walk out to their car and they got a parking ticket, it just puts everyone's morale so low. And like, here's some perspective. You're an Uber driver and you are driving and someone stops and you're in the yellow box, and or maybe you were just a little bit distracted because you've had a long day at work and you stop in the yellow box on accident. £80 fine. that is literally 5-6, that's almost a days of work that you're paying to the government, even though you're a working individual. What's the fucking point? There are questions whether this like reduces, a block in the traffic and like makes people's lives easier, and this is something I'll consider, but like these are really low hanging fruit. Like the ticket officer is just so annoying. Like, let's make everyone feel free. There's more, like, I know the 20 miles an hour rule saves lives, I totally agree. But like everyone in this country, or at least the older people that I'm listening to, say how this country's ruined driving for people.